Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 5 waiver wire targets for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be going over waiver wire targets for the running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and defensive positions. This week, the Dolphins and the Lions are on a bye week, so we have to address that. And also, there are many injuries and shifts within teams that are going to be taken into account. So before we get into today's episode, let me remind all of you, if you haven't yet already, click that subscribe button. Usually you see Tyron Smith here, and I tell you guys to, pancake block that subscribe button. But Tyron Smith on the last drive of the Dallas Cowboys game last night took a little bit of a bump, and we've retired him. We've brought Stephon Gilmore, one of the best, if not the best, cornerback in the National Football League here. And with your mouse, I'm challenging you to hit him with a route and try to get your cursor to that subscribe button. Hit him with a slant. Hit him with a hitch and go, post corner, 9 route, zig. Do something. Get him off you. Get that cursor to the subscribe button. Click that. Click the notification bell button to stay updated on all my videos. And make sure you click that like button today. Alrighty. Hey, everybody. How's it going? All right. Before we begin, before I talk about these running backs that are surrounding me, this was one of... we say it very often, I believe, but really this was one of the weirdest fantasy football weeks that I've experienced in quite some time. In terms of what was supposed to happen and what really happened, there was so much of a disparity. Just taking into account some performances that were absolutely just mind-boggling, I don't know. Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. The combination of those three quarterbacks only threw one total passing touchdown. Like, Mahomes didn't throw a passing touchdown. Watson didn't throw a passing touchdown. Dak Prescott didn't throw a passing touchdown. Tom Brady, if I'm not mistaken, I'm almost positive, didn't throw a passing touchdown. Like, what happened this week, right? On top of it, like, the top-tier receivers, like Julio, Amari Cooper, and Keenan Allen, all of them in half PPR scored 7.3 fantasy points when even Keenan Allen had one of the most favorable matchups, and so did Amari Cooper. It was extremely, extremely weird. On top of it, a couple games, like the Raiders somehow managed to beat the Colts. Okay, fine. That's not out of the blue. But then the Browns beat the Ravens. The Panthers beat the Texans. The Buccaneers beat the Rams. The Bears, with their backup quarterback for the entirety of the game, destroyed the Vikings. Case Keenum was placed, I think, one quarter into the game for Dwayne Haskins, and anybody who started, anyone on the Washington Redskins, boop, just sunk. Dwayne Haskins is going to kill that fantasy value, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Insane week. The Cowboys lost to the Seahawks. To the Saints. They lost to the Saints kicker, period. The Saints kicker outplayed the Cowboys. Like, insane. What an incredible weekend. But that's why we love football. Because on any given Sunday, anyone can win. Anyone could have an incredible performance. And that's why we watch. Because it's exciting and we don't know the outcome purely. We can assume that the Chiefs are going to win and the Patriots are going to win. But everybody else, it's a little bit tricky. All right, let's talk about my Week 3 waiver wire targets for the 2019 fantasy football season, starting at the running back position this week. All right, the first two names on top of the board should have already been picked up last week. Wayne Gallman had a fantastic performance, and it's as good as it can get. But again, they had an extremely favorable matchup against the Washington Redskins. But I still think the amount of touches that Wayne Gallman got, whether it was on the ground, I think he had about 18, and through the air, and he had a receiving touchdown himself. That in itself kind of solidifies his value. 100% needed to be picked up last week. There's no way he's available, but I did see that he was only owned in like 70-something% of leagues. I was like, okay, come on. We got to address this one more time before we move on. Wayne Gallman needs to be picked up. Moving on to number 2, Darrel Williams of the Kansas City Chiefs. Didn't play specifically well. 8 rushes, 13 yards, but had 2 rushing touchdowns, had about 4 catches out of the backfield. Really, LeSean McCoy wasn't used very often down near the goal line, so Darrel Williams was taking advantage of that. If, in fact, Damian Williams is to continue to miss time, Darrel Williams put up, 13.8 in week 3, and then 17 point something in week 4. So overall in half PPR, Darrel Williams has been a pretty good contributor that, if you've picked up and put him in the flex, has looked very good thus far. These two should have already been picked up, Williams and Gallman, but I just wanted to go ahead and mention them once again. All right, so the running back position is pretty thin. So if, in fact, nothing here pops out and jumps out to you, then there's nothing really much to pick up at the running back position. That's just how it's become thus far. But number 3, Ronald Jones, had another fantastic performance. Let's just go. I got to pull these up because I really do think Ronald Jones' stats are looking a lot better as the weeks progress here. All right, so let's see here. So here we go. So in week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers, 13 rushes, 75 yards. All right. Then he follows it in Carolina by completely being just wiped out of the entire game plan. 4 rushes for 9 yards. And that's the game that Peyton Barber had his monster game of 85 rushing yards and a touchdown, right? So we thought, okay, you know what? Ronald Jones is done. Peyton Barber has pretty much won that backfield, solidified himself as the RB1. Next thing you know, the last 2 weeks, Ronald Jones is playing pretty good football for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. In week 3, 14 rushes for 80 yards and had a big reception for, 40-some-odd yards. And then this last week against the Rams, my Rams got smacked, but he had 19 rushes for 70 yards and a touchdown. Overall, I mean, Ronald Jones looked pretty good. And with 19 rushing attempts, 14 rushing attempts, 13 rushing attempts in 3 games, it looks to me like they're trying to move away from Peyton Barber, and that a guy like Ronald Jones, who has the ability to work in the passing game, I know they have Darrel Williams still catching passes out of the backfield, but from what I can see thus far, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are leaning more and more towards Ronald Jones as time progresses, and it's going to solidify him as that starting running back. All right, moving on to number 4, Carlos Hyde. Still another good running back. I think Carlos Hyde this coming week against the matchup, I think they play against the Falcons, needs to be picked up, has a very good opportunity to play. Not just play, but have a very good week. The Falcons, if I'm not mistaken, the Falcons are not good, period. I don't know what they're doing. Defensively, offensively, they're inept. I can't believe they couldn't compete with the Titans yesterday. It's just incredible. But Carlos Hyde for sure. Him and Duke Johnson split snaps almost 50-50 yesterday. But I still do think that Carlos Hyde has the red zone opportunity and has majority of the early game rushing attempts instead of the third down work. Third down work, it's not really going to go towards Duke Johnson very often. They have so many other receivers there. Yes, they've struggled offensively, the Texans, but they'll get back on track. All right, moving on to number 5. This needs to be brought up because of the Thursday night game, right? Jordan Howard had a monster game, 18 touches, 3 total touchdowns. If you do believe that Jordan Howard is the Messiah, the Savior, and he's going to take over this backfield and run it for the next couple weeks, then you pick him up. I personally am not of that opinion. I do not believe that Jordan Howard is going to just outright make Darren Sproles and Miles Sanders disappear. But I do think that he's going to get a little bit more opportunity. When you have performances as such, the coaching staff does warm up to you more and more. And thus far this season, we did see Jordan Howard lose a little bit of favor in that backfield for the other pieces. But off of that performance, he could, parlay that into some more running, opportunities in that offense and get something going there. So as of right now, my number 5, I don't mind him as a pickup. I think he's going to be a bench stash and a guy that you can only play in bye weeks. But even then, you never know. There always could be an injury to that backfield and he takes over. All right, moving on to number 6, Frank Gore. Frank Gore was the only shining light in that entire game yesterday between the Bills and the Patriots. I mean, the Patriots, Tom Brady had one of the worst performances I've ever seen Tom Brady have. I got to find this. It's unheard of how bad Tom Brady played. But, it happens. The Buffalo Bills always give him trouble, at least recently. 18 for 39 passing. Oh, my God. 150 yards and an interception. Tom Brady was not looking good, to say the least. But Frank Gore broke over 100 rushing yards. I think he's the 4th all-time leading rusher in NFL history now. He's only a couple hundred yards away from a couple big names. I think it was like Barry Sanders is coming up on that list. He might catch him. He'll never catch Emmitt Smith because he's got way too many yards. But, Frank Gore, man, the legend is still going, and he's still performing well. I don't know where Devin Singletary stands in terms of injury. I know T.J. Yeldon was getting some work in that passing game, but Frank Gore, 100 rushing yards yesterday, and still going pretty strong in the right direction. So if he's not owned in your league, make sure you pick him up. Moving on to number 7, Chris Thompson. Thus far this season, Adrian Peterson has not shown up. There has been no life or sign of life out of that backfield in terms of a running offense, whether it was with Darius Geis and or Adrian Peterson. I can't wait. I hope Darius Geis can come back this season sometime, just to see just get a little bit of a glimpse of him. But that's not the case right now. Chris Thompson, going against the New England Patriots, a rookie quarterback has never beaten the Patriots. Therefore, Dwayne Haskins going into week 5 or here is not going to have himself a great week. He's going to have to pass the ball a lot because they're going to be down early in this game. And I really do think Chris Thompson might be his only option, considering the other guys, Terry McLaurin's dealing with an injury, Trey Quinn, Paul Richardson, they're going to be completely bottled up. I don't think this New England defense, who has really been the MVP of fantasy thus far this season, is going to let them do much. So Chris Thompson's not a bad pickup this week. The last guy I wanted to mention, I do not know his exact timeline of his injury, but I do believe that Tevin Coleman needs to be picked up if he's available. I believe what I saw, he was available he was only owned in 63% of fantasy leagues thus far in Yahoo. So that should be, pretty consistent across the board. If he's available, I would pick him up, because if he's coming back off of this injury that he sustained in week 1, he's going to be in the rotation of running backs. They're going to send Jeff Wilson Jr. back down to wherever he came from, stealing all those touchdowns. Mostert and Breida are still going to be, contributors in this offense, but I do believe that Tevin Coleman is the lead back of this team, and that's what he showed in week 1 to start off. So hopefully he can come back and regain that position. That's why I wanted to mention him. All right, guys, let's go ahead and move on. Oops, that's not where I wanted to go. We went to tight ends. But let's go back really quickly. Okay, now we're back at where we're supposed to be. We're back at the wide receiver position. All right, talking about the wide receiver position as a whole. Okay, so Courtland Sutton shouldn't be available. I mentioned this during Hidden Gems. He was only in 52% of leagues. He probably shouldn't have been. Now he's only in like 54, right? So 2% of you out there went and picked him up and hopefully played him because Jalen Ramsey was out. Because my God, did he have a monster performance. 20-plus points, 2 touchdowns. The guy is on track for 128 targets. And to be the wide receiver 1 of that team has looked very good thus far this season. Really good. I mean, it's very exciting to see how much he's progressed from last year in comparison. So that's always great. So Courtland Sutton, for sure, the number 1 wide receiver of this team. I know him and Emmanuel Sanders can go back and forth on who's that number 1 wide receiver. We really haven't seen much. I mean, Phillip Lindsay, you want to talk about Broncos? Gone. 1 week. It literally, gone. Unbelievable. But Courtland Sutton needs to be picked up, guys. He is a wide receiver 1, and he's a very big contributor of said offense. All right, moving on to number 2, Geronimo Allison. Okay, so I'm assuming Marquez Valdes-Scantling, considering he's the wide receiver 2 of the Packers, is already owned. Now, Devontae Adams is going to be dealing with that turf toe injury, and I'm not sure how long he's going to be out. I'm not sure if that injury is going to nag him throughout the entirety of the rest of the season, but Geronimo Allison, I believe, needs to be picked up in order to mitigate that. If, in fact, you are a Devontae Adams owner, you should go and pick up, Geronimo Allison just in case, because if in the next couple weeks he's out, you'll have his next successor within that offense to come and pick up some value. So I do believe, Geronimo Allison is a guy that we should look into. He's scored a couple touchdowns in the last couple weeks. Obviously, his target counts aren't great, but really the entire offense there is not very pass heavy as it used to be. So for now, Geronimo Allison, not a bad option. Moving on to number 3, Golden Tate. Golden Tate does not come back from suspension until does he come back this week? I got to actually confirm this. I'm almost positive he does. It was a 4-week suspension. He's served his 4 weeks. All right, cool. So he returns from suspension this week. Just wanted to clarify that. He comes back from suspension. He's going to be the slot receiver of this team. He's going to be the number 2, technically, wide receiver of this team. There's Sterling Shepard. There's Ingram. Then there'll be Tate, and then there'll be somebody in the backfield catching. This is going to be a pretty good offense, all in all. With their offensive line being able to batter teams, and their quarterback sitting in there, has the ability to run, this Giants offense, man, if they had Saquon at this moment, they'd look a lot better. They'd look, at 2-2, they'd look like a team that can actually maybe run something. Just saying. I know their defense is awful, but offensively, they look like they have some pretty good firepower going forward. But Golden Tate, a guy that needs to be picked up if he is not yet already, because I know he's been on suspension. Many people may have ignored him or left him on the waivers. All right, moving on to number 4, Jamison Crowder. A guy that, again, another slot receiver who was ignored. Let's not forget, in week 1 with Sam Darnold, the guy had 17 targets, 14 receptions, and 98 receiving yards. All right, that in all, should not be ignored. Absolutely cannot be ignored. Jamison Crowder was so good in week 1 because Sam Darnold, the way that this offense works, they warm up Sam Darnold. They get him going with short passes, get him in a rhythm, and then they begin to move downfield. Jamison Crowder is his little Cooper Kupp, security blanket of this offense, and I do believe as Sam Darnold comes back this week against the Eagles defense, who has struggled against the passing game, Jamison Crowder is a guy that needs to be picked up and can be played at a wide receiver 3 spot. Robbie Anderson is a little bit different considering I know he is probably more widely owned. But Robbie Anderson is not going to get as many targets. With Chris Herndon coming back soon, with Le'Veon Bell in that backfield, Jamison Crowder is a guy that I really do like going forward and needs to be picked up. All right, moving on. Let's talk about Cole Beasley really quickly. Had himself a good week. That's what we should expect. If, in fact, they take away John Brown, Cole Beasley is going to get work. Now, the question is in fact, Josh Allen going to play this coming week? Because that is the biggest question. If it's Matt Barkley, I don't want to deal with anybody on that offense. But if it's Josh Allen, again, Cole Beasley for the second week in a row, guys, and a hidden gem needs to be addressed. I mean, he's a guy that can contribute pretty heavily in a PPR format. All right, moving on to number 6, Mohamed Sanu. Mohamed Sanu has gone ahead in the last 2 weeks. Him and Austin Hooper have gone ahead and grabbed Calvin Ridley's soul and put it in a bottle and flushed it down the toilet. Because Calvin Ridley's gone. Just absolutely gone. Now, I'm not saying Calvin Ridley's not coming back anytime soon. I'm just saying at this moment in time, Mohamed Sanu and Austin Hooper are far greater targets or far more preferred targets within this offense than just about Julio or Calvin Ridley. And somehow Devontae Freeman's out here catching 8 or 9 balls. It's 8, 7, 9 balls. It's insane. Mohamed Sanu's been pretty good in the last 2 weeks. Typically, Mohamed Sanu, if I'm not mistaken, they play the Texans, right? Yeah, look, the Texans are going to play tough defense. And the thing about the Texans defense, if in fact Mohamed Sanu is to have himself another good week because of the fact that they're keying in on Julio and they're keying in on Ridley, and the other options of this offense seem to be widely, open, and Matt Ryan decides to, target them more, so be it. Mohamed Sanu had himself a pretty good week, and I'm confident about it. So that's a couple in a row now that he's been able to string together. All right, moving on to number 7, A.J. Brown. I just had to mention one receiver for the Titans because if I didn't, it would seem a little bit lopsided. Now, they do play against the Bills, and I really do believe that the Bills defense are going to give them a little bit of work this week. But A.J. Brown had himself 3 receptions, 2 touchdowns, had himself a pretty good game. Is he a guy that you need to pick up? No. Is he a guy that if you're in a deeper league should be addressed and picked up? I believe that is the case. All right, so that's why I have him on this list. Moving on to number 8, another San Francisco 49er at the bottom of my list here, in case he's not already owned. I do believe Dante Pettis, coming off of this bye week, should be better. He ended off the week prior with, 4 receptions, 20 yards, and a touchdown. Hopefully, Dante Pettis going forward within this offense, they play against the Browns this coming week, as their slot receiver, hopefully, can figure it out. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work. Maybe, Deebo Samuel and Kendrick Bourne and Marquise Goodwin, play him underneath the table like they have in the first 4 weeks of the season. But Dante Pettis, I believe, is too talented of a receiver or a fantasy option or anything, a talent to be left on the bench for this 49ers offense. Hopefully they address that. Hopefully he gets back into the scheme. I'm not saying he's a start this week. I'm just saying you might want to think about picking him up if you need wide receiver depth. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the tight end position going into week 5. All right, Chris Herndon, number 1, that's for certain. A guy that will be coming off a suspension, not this week, but the following week. because they had a bye week in week 4. He has not technically served his 4-game suspension. Therefore, in week 6, he will be returning. But for those of you who are in need of tight end help, let's say, for example, you own Darren Waller. Darren Waller has a week 6 bye week. You pick up Chris Herndon, you can instantly play him next week and fill into that void. And then perhaps if you want to stick with Darren Waller the rest of the year, you trade a guy like Herndon. If you're a guy that has a upcoming bye week for another tight end, go and pick this guy up. I really do believe he's going to be a good contributor for this offense. There is not too much depth. Actually, there's a pretty good amount of depth at the tight end position this year in comparison, but there's a lot of inconsistencies. And if we can find Chris Herndon being consistent and seeing consistent target rates, he could be a pretty good option. All right, moving on to number 2, Tyler Eifert. Tyler Eifert is being brought up because they play against the Cardinals. The Cardinals have given up the most points to the tight end position. There's a reason why Will Disley did what he did. The Cardinals are awful against opposing tight ends. In the last couple of weeks, they've always given up 15, 16 plus points to opposing tight ends in half PPR. Tyler Eifert, CJ Uzomah. Who is it going to be? I believe it's going to be Eifert. I think we'll get a better look this week on who's really running the tight end 1 placement within this team, because they do play against the Steelers later tonight. But Tyler Eifert, for those of you who are struggling and perhaps you had Hawkinson and you need a replacement for this week, or you have Jared Cook and you're crying, or you have Vance McDonald, or something of that sort, Tyler Eifert's not a bad option. Moving on to number 3, Jack Doyle. You know what's funny? That entire offense had a lot of tight end usage yesterday, right? Eric Ebron, I think he dropped 3 passes, and then at the end of the game had 1 catch for 48-yard touchdown, made it his entire week. Beautiful. But Jack Doyle, good amount of targets, good receptions, had himself, a touchdown. Jack Doyle was good. That's what I expected last week. There's a reason why he was mentioned in this matchup, because if in fact T.Y. Hilton went down, they're going to use more tight ends. Sure, they use Zach Pascal and Chester Rogers, who I should have highlighted in the wide receiver section, but I didn't, whatever. But Jack Doyle, another good fantasy option moving forward. I probably should have mentioned, I don't know why I don't have Jimmy Graham on this list. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Right now, boom, this will be a timestamp. Jimmy Graham needs to be on this list, and I don't know what I completely did, but I've somehow forgotten Jimmy Graham on said list. Jimmy Graham needs to be here. Jimmy Graham maybe even needs to be the number 3 option and move Jack Doyle down. I think the amount of targets, 9 targets, 6 receptions, and a touchdown, should have had 2 touchdowns last week against the Eagles. I believe going forward, should probably be a better option for this offense if in fact Devontae Adams is down, especially in the red zone. Outside of giving the ball to Aaron Jones, Jimmy Graham is that option in the red zone. So just wanted to highlight him. I'm just shocked I didn't even have him on this list. I don't know why. Whatever. All right, moving on to number 4, Dawson Knox for the Bills. Again, if Josh Allen's playing, this is a great option. If not, Barkley did target him a couple times here and there, but I do believe that of the tight ends last week that had major weeks like Atkins or Fells, Dawson Knox stayed consistent. Had himself another good performance, was used heavily in this offense. That's promising. So he's my number 4 option. Number 5, Noah Fant. Here's the thing about Noah Fant. He scored a touchdown. That's fantastic and all, but who do they play this coming week? They play against the Chargers. Chargers against the tight end position, not great. If Noah Fant can, string something together this week, I wouldn't be surprised because of how much he's been targeted in this offense. He's not a huge part, but he could be utilized because he's such a versatile player. He's another option. Number 6, Jared Cook, played against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, giving up the second most points to the tight end position. Gerald Everett last week had himself a fantastic week on literally one drive. Just Everett, touchdown Everett. Like 4 receptions in a row, and he was done. The rest of the game, he was done. They brought in Higbee. They messed around. So Jared Cook could be an option. Finally, could maybe see some resurgence in this offense. All right, moving on to the quarterback position. Here we go. Okay, so here's the thing. Jacoby Brissett plays against the Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs are pretty good. They played decently on defense in terms of causing some, weird turnovers. I mean, so many fumbles in that game. But Jacoby Brissett's going to be fine. He's another good option this week. If you're missing Matthew Stafford on a bye week, Jacoby Brissett's a good pickup. Jameis Winston, another great pickup, playing against the Saints defense. I know the Saints defense looked good, but Jameis Winston looked fantastic yesterday. That entire offense was unstoppable, literally unstoppable. Sure, their defense gave up just as many points, but my gosh, if Jameis Winston can light teams up like that, that's exactly the Jameis Winston we want to see. That's what we expected to see, and hopefully that continues to stay on par. Moving on, Andy Dalton hasn't played this week, could completely shit the bed, but in week 5, he plays against the Cardinals at home. Very favorable matchup, and I do believe he should be good to go in said matchup. Kirk Cousins, number 4. Kirk Cousins is probably one of the worst quarterbacks in the National Football League right now. I've never said replace this quarterback so much than when I was watching that Vikings-Bears game. As a Thielen owner, as a Stephon Diggs owner, as a Dalvin Cook owner, it is extremely frustrating to watch a quarterback play so bad and fumble so often. It's unbelievable. It really is. A guy that went from 30 touchdowns to what he is now, he has regressed so... It's unbelievable. But this coming week, he plays against the New York Giants defense. I know it's in New York, but Kirk Cousins, this is your only week. This is it. You either improve or they're trading for Case Keenum, and they're bringing him back to Minnesota. I promise you they'll do it. I promise you. All right, I'm frustrated. We're moving on. Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, playing against the Vikings defense. Sure, that's fine. The whole point is if you are looking for... if you're desperate for an option, he could be up there. He could be available considering he didn't play too well against the Redskins defense. Someone probably might drop him. And if you're considering playing against the Vikings, I wouldn't say that's the best idea, but he does have weapons and they could, string something together. Again, was it Chase Daniel, the backup quarterback for the Bears, was able to beat that defense. So just putting it out there. Number 6, Gardner Minshew, playing against the Panthers defense. Panthers played really well. They really dominated, but Gardner Minshew has been pretty consistent thus far this season. They're putting up a good amount of points within that offense. The running game is starting to get together, and James O'Shaughnessy somehow is his goal line option going forward. But Minshew been pretty good. All right, moving on. Let's talk about my defensive options before we finish today's video. It's a little bit shorter, going pretty quickly, and that's just how it is. Some weeks the options are pretty straightforward. There's, it's either black or white. There's not very much gray space within this episode in terms of options. Moving on, number 1, as the defensive target this coming week, the Jacksonville Jaguars will be playing the Panthers. Kyle Allen looked like dog shit. Like, he was not a good quarterback. J.J. Watt was really giving him trouble. This pass rush forced 3 fumbles from him. He needs to protect the ball more. And I don't know if he's capable of doing so, especially against a Calais Campbell, Yannick Ngakoue getting after him. Potentially could be some trouble for him. So Jacksonville, good defensive option. Number 2, the Chargers this coming week. I know many teams may have already had them on roster because they were playing them against the Dolphins. If somebody drops them against the Broncos, I don't mind that at all. I don't mind that whatsoever. All right, moving on. The Tennessee Titans playing against if I'm not mistaken, the Bills. Okay, if Josh Allen is out, you want to play Tennessee Titans against Matt Barkley. That would be a fantastic matchup. They would probably get 3 pick sixes and have themselves a great week. Again, in that same game, the Buffalo Bills against the Tennessee Titans. The Buffalo Bills made Tom Brady struggle more than I've ever seen him struggle. There's no way that they can not do the same thing to Marcus Mariota. Marcus Mariota is not a good quarterback. We know this. Sometimes he hides it within that offense and they give him opportunities to make easy passes and everybody else does the work. The Buffalo Bills could expose that offense, certainly. The Carolina Panthers going against Gardner Minshew. They've been pretty good defensively thus far. Their pass rush is getting after quarterbacks, really making it difficult in the last 2 weeks against Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson, mobile quarterbacks. Gardner Minshew is not very mobile, so if they can get after him in this offensive line, they could find some success there. The last defense I wanted to mention is the Dallas Cowboys versus the Green Bay Packers. If, in fact, let's say, for example, Devontae Adams is out, I do believe this offense will struggle as a whole in comparison because it's going to be really difficult to run the ball on the Cowboys in general. And then you have the fact that you don't have your number 1 wide receiver, and it's going to be a little bit of a struggle there, in my opinion. So that's always an option. There are other options. You could play, the 49ers versus the Browns if you think that there's no way that the Patriots are available. There's no way that the Bears are available. There's no way that, maybe you play the Seahawks against the Rams on Thursday night. That might be a way to go. But looking at these options, nothing really much that sticks out that is probably available in your leagues. Maybe if you think that entire Buccaneers project was a joke, maybe you play the Saints defense against that offense and see how that goes. Maybe the Texans against the Falcons. They've been pretty good in defense overall. But that's pretty much it, everybody. Those have been my waiver wire targets for Week 5 of the 2019 fantasy football season. I want to thank everybody for watching, taking the time out of the day to join me here and talk about fantasy football. It's really enjoyable, and I appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day. So tomorrow, running backs. Wednesday, wide receiver Wednesday. Thursday, we'll have quarterbacks and tight ends. Friday is hidden gems, as per usual. Sunday, we'll have the morning question and answer. Other than that, am I thinking? No, I think that's good to go. Hopefully, you guys, no injuries, plagued you this weekend. Hopefully, you drop all of those garbage Redskins. You keep me glowing, but, I really do believe Dwayne Haskins is not going to look good for quite some time. That offense is going down the drain really quickly. But anyway, thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys. Peace.